All right, we're moving on to measuring and recording depreciation on plant assets. This is a major part of what financial accounting and accrual accounting is all about, because we're taking an asset with a 10, 20, or 30-year useful life and determining which part of that cost is going to be expended in the current year. So first, there's a little terminology you're probably already familiar with. Is estimate. The first one is estimated useful life. When you're going to do depreciation, you need to estimate the length of time that the long-term asset is going to be of service to the company. Estimated residual value. You have to estimate how much the item will be worth at the end of its useful life. And from the estimated residual value and the cost, you can calculate the depreciable base or the depreciable cost. So if you take the historical cost less how much you expect to sell it for at the end, that sum is the total amount of depreciation the company will recognize over the item's useful life. And what is depreciation? It's just a systematic allocation of that depreciable base or that depreciable cost. So what it is not is you're not setting up a fund to buy a new one or something like that. It is just a process by which you say, okay, I bought a car for $20,000. The car is going to last 5 years and then it's going to be worth nothing. So over $20,000 over 5 years, if I take 1/5 a year, which is a reasonable rule, I would recognize $4,000 of expense a year. So it's just a way to allocate the cost over time, okay? It is not a reserve. Don't get it confused with some type of reserve to replace the asset. And the depreciation expense journal entry is always going to look the same. You've seen it already. Depreciation expense, accumulated depreciation. Now what you're doing in this chapter is you're going to see where the numbers come from. So every journal entry, you have accounts. So you have to know which accounts are involved, whether they're debited or credited. And then you have to calculate amounts. Right here in this objective, you know that depreciation expense is going to be debited and accumulated depreciation will be credited. What we're really working on is, hey, how do we calculate the number? All right, so there's going to be several different methods. What I'm going to do is use the same example and apply the same set of facts and apply several different methods. So a corporation, they buy a truck for $80,000. They think it's going to last 5 years. Alternative way to say it might last 5 years is we think our trucks last 100,000 miles until we don't find them useful anymore. Then we sell them and usually we get $10,000. So the depreciable base is the cost of $80,000 minus the estimated residual value of $10,000. And this depreciable cost per mile, well, if I'm going to do my depreciation by mile, I'm depreciating, the thing cost me 80, but I'm going to get 10 at the end. So I'm only depreciating 70,000 over 100,000, which equals 70 over 100, and that's where your 70 cents comes from. So every mile you depreciate 70 cents. So in your personal life, if you have a car for $20,000, you're going to drive it 100,000 miles, you're depreciating 20 cents a mile. But this truck's a little more expensive. So here's straight line method. It's the most popular method. 75% of companies or assets out there are depreciated using straight line. Very simple and a reasonable way to approach it. So what is the depreciation per year on a straight line basis? You take the depreciable base and you divide by the estimated useful life. So we're going to recognize the same amount every year. 70,000 divided by 5 is 14,500. 14,400. Why is that not sounding right? That's 14,000 on the dot. 14,000 on the dot. Okay. All right, so that should be 14,000. So we're going on to the next method, which is units of production method. And this way depreciates as a function of some activity. So if you had a bottling machine and it could bottle 5 million beers, every million beers would be 20% of its useful life. All right? So what you do here is first you calculate the depreciation per unit. And we did that up above in the chart, but we reiterated here, where it's the depreciable base over the estimated useful life in units, and then 70 cents per mile. And then somebody has to record, hey, how many miles did we drive the truck this year? So, and this year they drove it 30,000. 30,000 times 70 cents is 21,000 miles of depreciation expense. Every year is dependent upon the number of units of activity. So unlike the other methods, straight line and the one we're about to see, double declining balance, where there's a formula that applies through the entire useful life, for units of production approach, we won't know until we see the actual activity. Okay, and finally, here's double declining balance. This is what's referred to, this is an accelerated method. More depreciation expense earlier in its useful life, okay? There are lots of different accelerated methods. This is just one, and it's the one you'll be responsible for. The first thing is you calculate the double declining balance rate, which is 2 times the straight line rate. Now you may be thinking, is there a triple declining balance? Yes, you could even have 1.5 times declining balance. We're just going to stick with the double declining balance. So the straight line rate is just 1 over the useful life. So with the useful life, we were depreciating 20% per year. Now we multiply by 2, and it's 40% per year. That's the double declining balance rate. Now here's the big trick. The big trick is not getting the rate. The big trick is you may get used to the depreciable cost with straight line, but in double declining balance method, you use the beginning of period carrying value. So we're using the 80, not the depreciable cost. So 40% times 80 is 32,000. Now in the second year, what happens? Well, we had cost of 80, and we had accumulated depreciation of 32. So in parentheses, this thing here is the book value at the beginning of the year. This is BV, book value at beginning of year. Okay, and then now, so the depreciation ends up being 19,200. With straight line, we saw 14,000 a year. With our accelerated method, we're going to see something over 14,000 at the beginning, and then below 14,000 near the end. So it will decrease systematically. Okay, keep going until your accumulated depreciation equals your depreciable base. You never depreciate more than your depreciable base. So if we look at these, and I got the 14,000 right. So we have 14,000 every year for straight line. For double declining balance, 32,000, 19,2, 11,5,2, 69,12. And then this year, right here for double declining balance, we had to plug it so that it didn't exceed 70,000. All right, if we just did the math, it would have been more than that, and we would have depreciated more than 70. So the last year you might have to plug, and sometimes it's even a year before the last year. This units of production method, these are just activity reports. They could have been totally different. So we can't really say on a units production how it's going to compare to straight line. But between straight line and double declining balance, these two are, the first 2 years are greater than 14,000, and the last 3 years are less than 14,000. So with double declining balance and any accelerated method, you have more earlier.